looking at, or at least beginning in chapter 1 and working our way through. Lord willing, we're going to get to chapter 3. That's the plan. That's a lot of ground for me to cover. So I have to say, this has been, it's such a beautiful book, right? It's been a great encouragement to my own heart as I've studied this. I mean, it's really been a delight to study it. But it is a challenge to teach it, all right? And the greatest challenge really is not what's here. The greatest challenge is what's out here, and that is just the diversity that we have within even a small setting like this. You know, we have singles, and we have marrieds, and we have widows and widowers, and those who have been divorced, and those who have no desire to get married ever again. And so we're in all kinds of situations. And so I just want to remind you that even though we started this book out, and certainly, the main theme is love, particularly love that is displayed in God's ordained relationship of marriage between a man and a woman. Beautiful picture of a marriage relationship. And even though that's what we see right in front of us, we said it's always pointing to something bigger, right? That's the point of marriage. Marriage is pointing to the relationship between Christ and his bride. And so I want to kind of set the stage, like regardless of where you're at tonight, regardless of what's going on in your life, and particularly in your relationship, if you're here and you're a Christian and a follower of Christ, there's application for you this evening. So I don't want you to lose sight of that. We outlined the book pretty clearly, right? It's divided up into 3 different sections. Beginning in chapter 1 through the first part of chapter 3 is the courtship. The courtship, or we would call the dating relationship. This is what's happening before the marriage. All right, so beginning in verse 6, going through chapter 4, is the wedding and the wedding night, right? So that's what people typically think of when they think of the Song of Solomon. And then going into chapters 5 through 8, we have the marriage relationship. And so we've just divided our time out between those. So tonight we're particularly thinking about the courtship or the dating relationship. And so if you're here and you are single and you're looking to get married, there is great practical instruction for you if you're thinking about those things for your future. If you are married, the things that we're going to see here are going to help you in your marriage. And if you're not married and you have no desire to get married, that's okay. These things that we look at are going to help you in your walk with the Lord, okay? So don't tune out when we start talking about dating and saying, that stuff is long behind me, Pastor. And again, that's the challenge for me as well, right? I mean, the dating life for me was a long, long time ago. And yet, these truths I see so very helpful for my marriage right here and right now. So let's take a look together at the Word, and we'll pray, and we'll just ask the Lord's help as we walk through this. I'm going to begin in verse 5. We left off. We just looked at the first 4 verses last week and got kind of an overview of the book. We see the Shulamite woman speaking in verse 5, and she says, "I am very dark but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not gaze at me because I am dark, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keepers of the vineyard, but my own vineyard I have not kept. Tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. For why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? If you do not know, O most beautiful among women, follow in the tracks of the flocks and pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tents. I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels. We will make for you ornaments of gold studded with silver." And that's a good place for us to stop. We'll have a word of prayer, and we'll ask the Lord's blessing on his word. Father, we thank you so much for this time that we can gather together and just open your word. And we believe that your word is, Lord, it's powerful, and it's living, and it's able to meet us right where we're at. And we know that every word that comes from you is inspired and profitable. And so I ask, Lord, that you would help us tonight as we look together at these truths, that we would see more of your love for us. Lord, that we would grow in love for one another. Lord, I pray that you would strengthen the marriages of your people in your church. Lord, I pray that you would instruct and encourage and exhort young people who are seeking out marriage relationships, Father, that you would grant them wisdom as we see these truths tonight. Lord, we are so thankful that, Lord, you speak to every area of our life. And so I pray that you would help us now. Lord, we ask it in the name of Jesus, and amen. As we look at that progression, we see this courtship, and then it leads to wedding, and then it leads to marriage. And I think it's so important right at the outset as we think about how this relationship is portrayed in the Scripture that this progression matters. Right? It's very important that we grab a hold of it. That relationships, right, intimate relationships, are meant to culminate in marriage. Right? That's the flow of the book. Right? And that is certainly in our culture, right, it is countercultural, right? Right? Our culture is not pro-marriage. In general, right, we have a very different mindset. Particularly today, you see people who are putting marriage off longer and longer so they can pursue their own goals and their own dreams and their own desires because they look at marriage as something that's a hindrance to that's going to hold them back from what is good for them. But the Bible never paints marriage as a hindrance. Right? It pictures marriage, what? He who desires a wife desires a good thing. Right? Marriage always in the Scripture is magnified. It's held up as this beautiful thing. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who are called to singleness. There are. But by and large, most people are going to be in a marriage relationship, or certainly in an intimate relationship at some point. And what we've seen today within our culture is to not only delay, but forgo marriage altogether. When it comes to relationships, the primary way that people approach relationships today is what? It's hook up, shack up, break up, repeat. Right? That's the approach to relationships, right? Hook up, shack up, break up, repeat. And that's a common theme that we see playing out. And so it's no surprise when eventually somebody finally says, you know what, this is the one, and they get into a marriage relationship because they finally found the one that they've been looking for, that it doesn't last, right? Because they've been practicing this, I'm in this relationship until I'm not in this. So relationships within our culture are very self-centered, me-focused. It's for what I can get out of it. And we see something very different in the Scriptures. And I just want to hold that up to you, right? This is not if you're a follower of Christ, we don't promote a hookup culture or a shack-up culture. Right? We're looking for something better. Right? And so God, in His wisdom, we have a different picture, right? The picture for a godly marriage is pursue, progress, propose, period. Right? Right? There's no repeat. Right? This is it. Right? God wants this relationship to begin in a pursuit of one another that progresses to the place of marriage, and that's it, right? One man, one woman, one lifetime. These are truths that we've talked about many times. And there are some of you who are going, Pastor, I want that. I want that. I long for that. I desire to have that. And I think there's help here. Right? So maybe just even looking at our passage, what is a relationship that ends in marriage? What does it look like initially? Right? What do you see, right? So we have the end in the Song of Solomon bringing us to that ultimate goal of a marriage that is filled with, we said, right? Desire, delight, devotion, right? That was the big outline from last week. Right? So it was brought to you by the letter D, right? Today it's the letter P, right? So we're going to talk about pursue, progress. Pursue and progress. And so one of the difficulties in the context of a relationship, and there's nothing new under the sun, right? We read in this, in verses 5 and 6, right, this woman is talking to these other right? These other women who are around, these other Jewish young ladies, and she says, what? I'm dark, but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem. Right? She says, do not gaze at me because I'm dark. The sun has looked upon me. What's she saying? I'm not much to look at, right? And it's interesting. She's had some issues in her home, right? You never see her father mentioned, not once. She talks about her mother and her mother's sons, right? Her stepbrothers, most likely in this scenario. And they don't treat her very well. They make her work outside. And because she works outside, she's been darkened by the sun. And in that culture, that wasn't something that was looked favorably upon. Isn't it interesting how things shift, right? So now everybody wants the tan look. And here, the tan look was not the look. And she's saying, I don't have the look that a man wants. Don't look on me. And so there's a lot of insecurity. She starts out, she's like, I found the one, right? Your love, right? She's talking about him, and they're like, yep, he's a good catch. And she's going, but look at me, right? Why would anybody desire me? Why would anybody want me? And this happens very often. You can derail yourself in a hurry in a relationship because of insecurity. Right? And so what happens here is she pursues, right? She says, tell me, you, in verse 7, who my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. What's she saying here? I really would like to spend some more time with you, is what she's saying. If where your flock is at noon, you're going to have them lie down, and we're going to have some time to ourselves to get to know each other. Right? So when you talk about dating, you talk about courtship, this pursuit is important, but the way in which it happens matters. And here, she says, I'd like to spend some more time with you. That's important, but she's going to do it in a public place, right? He says, where the other shepherds are. Right? We're gonna come, and I'm going to spend some time with you there. So there's nothing shady going on. There's nothing inappropriate. She even says, I don't want to look like one who veils herself. I don't want to look like a prostitute, right? So she's pursuing. I want to spend time with you. She's uncertain about whether the feelings are mutual. Right? Is there mutual feelings here between this man who her heart has already kind of attached itself to? Right? He is the one who my soul loves. And then notice in verse 8, right, he responds. He says, if you do not know, O most beautiful among women, follow in the tracks of the flock. Pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tents. Right, what's he saying? The path is, it's marked clear. Right? Follow the path, bring your flock, right, and we'll meet. Right? So there's some reciprocation here. That's a good thing, right? This is a good start to a relationship. In fact, notice as he speaks, he's going to speak to her need. What is her need? Right now, she's feeling very insecure, right? She doesn't see herself as someone who can be loved. And what does he say to her? I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. How you like that, ladies? A beautiful horse, right? Well, this would have been a compliment, right? For like the Egyptian, right? This is a black beauty, right? That's what he's saying, right? The Egyptian horses were the finest in the world. A mare among the stallions. A mare among the stallions would have drove all the stallions crazy. He's just saying, you drive me crazy, right? There's a picture here of, he's just saying, my love, and that's his common refrain for her. Your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels. He says, you're pretty nice to look at, right? There's a real physical attraction that we see. Right? You say, where does a relationship begin that ends in marriage? Well, it begins with an attraction, right? There is a physical attraction that has to be there. Now, I'm not saying that can't grow over time, but if that's never there, that's not the person you should marry, all right? If there's no attraction, and there is a clear reciprocal kind of attraction. She's into him. He's into her. They want to spend more time together. That's important for the relationship. Right? When I talk about pursue here, right, and this is big, I think, for all of us when we think about, regardless of what level we're thinking, right, when we talk about pursue, there's an instance here where we see that they want to spend time together. And that's so vital for a relationship, right? You want to, if you're going to marry someone, you want to marry someone who you want to be with, right? You want to marry someone who you want to spend time with. As you spend time with someone, you ever spent time with someone and you're like, that person drives me nuts. Right? Like, that just, I can't stand this and I can't stand that. You should not marry that person, right? And I say that simply because sometimes what I see happen in young people is they'll overlook those things and think, well, it'll get better, right? And so we're gonna take the big step and we're gonna get married and he'll change and he'll get better and maybe he'll think the same thing, right? Well, those are some flaws that we can work on. No. Right? You don't marry someone hoping to change them, right? Please, right? We can go back to Genesis chapter 2 where Adam gets Eve, right? This is a gift from God, and he just receives her as is. In fact, he receives her in such a way that he's going, thank you, right? That's what you want in the person that you're going to marry. Right? You want someone who you enjoy spending time with, right? And so presence matters. And I say that not just to young people who are looking to get married. I say that to married individuals today. If you want your marriage to prosper, then you need to spend time together. Right? We talked a little bit briefly last week about married couples who are just living two separate lives. Right? That's not what God has intended. God has intended something better, right, for your marriage. And so if you're going to experience, then you have to pursue one another. You gotta spend time with each other. Right? And so this is important. Now here's what they're going to do. They're going to go on a picnic. All right. So you say, where do you see that? Verse 12, he says, while my king was on his couch. And you say, well, that doesn't sound like a picnic. But notice down in, I lost my spot there. Verse 16, she says, our couch is green, the beams of our house are cedar, and our rafters are pine. All right, so the couch is what? It's the green grass. They're outside, and they're going to spend some time together outdoors. They're going to get to know each other. So it says, while the king was on his couch, my nard gave forth its fragrance. My beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh that lies between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-gedi. Right, now that's the language of aromatherapy. Okay, that's what she's saying. I put my nard gave forth its fragrance. This is Chanel number 5. She's right. I walk by and he knows my smell, and it caught his attention. And she's saying, I've got this sachet of myrrh between my breasts right here, and it brings this aroma. She says, really what I want is for that to be him. Right? That's really what she's saying there. Now this is desires and longings that are growing in her. So there is this attraction that is intensifying where she's saying, yeah, I like to be with him, but I really want to be with him. Right? There's a real, and so I want to be very clear. There's nothing wrong with that desire. That desire is a good thing. Right? And it's leading to the place in which it can be a reality, and it's only right within that reality. Right? And we'll talk about that more in the coming weeks. But we see this picture here, right? They enjoy spending time together. And then in verse 15, he says, behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. Right? Now, so they're spending time together, and the more time they spend together, the more their love for each other grows. To the point where, right? I mean, it's not unusual to get lost in your partner's eyes, right? But the eyes are what? They're the windows to the soul, right? When he says your eyes are beautiful, he's talking more than just about the physical appearance. This is poetry. He's saying, I love who you are, right? To the deepest part of your being, right? When your eyes are beautiful, he's saying you are beautiful inside and out, right? So the attraction is not entirely physical. He loves her for who she is. Right? That's so important. A relationship that is based only on physical attraction will fizzle. Why? Because it ain't always going to be that way, right? That's just a reality, right? Look around. Right? This is the way it is, right? It's just not going to stay that way. If it's based entirely on the physical, it will fizzle. Right? But here, there's something deeper growing. Right? There's something where this love is increasing and intensifying. And so we see she responds in verse 16, "Behold, you are beautiful, my beloved, truly delightful. Our couch is green, the beams of our house are cedar, rafters are pine." Notice what she says in verse 1 of chapter 2. "I am a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys." What a change. She's not saying, "Don't look at me," right? I'm a beautiful flower. Right? Now she sees herself as just a flower among many flowers. And I know this verse, right, it's been ripped out of context and we've used it to sing our hymns, but who's the one speaking here? It's not him, right? It's her, right? And she's saying, I am the rose of Sharon. I am the lily of the valleys. How did this transformation happen? What is it that brings her from a place that says, "Don't look upon me," to, "I'm the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys"? He's been sweet talking her, right? She is loved. He loves her, right, for who she is. He loves her in such a way that she is affirmed. And so she now begins to see herself the way he sees her. That's big, guys. You hear this language here. I don't know how many, right, just talking to the married men here for a while, right? Like, you're already married and you've sealed the deal, and then you just kind of get lazy. Right? You need to tell your wife that you love her. You need to tell your wife that she's beautiful. You need to tell her, right? You say, "Well, I put food on the table, and I work hard, and I do all these things." No. You need to tell her. You need to tell her. That's what's happening here, right? So you see this pursuit. We're just going to say, right, if you're married here, never stop dating your wife. Never stop pursuing your spouse. Right? So even though you may now be married, you want to continue to pursue this person. Right? So this is a picture here where she now sees herself as this, and notice he responds, right? Well, she responds again in verse 3 and says, "As an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young men. With great delight I sat in his shadow, and his fruit was sweet to my taste." All right, so she responds with this idea of, now I'm this lily among the valleys, but you are this apple tree, right, out in the middle of the forest. It would have been unique. It would have been rare, something you would not expect to find. And what does she say? "I find underneath of the shade, I find provision and protection. The fruit is sweet, and the shade it keeps me from the sun that has so darkened her." She's saying, in this relationship, I'm finding someone who I feel safe with. I'm finding someone who is going to provide what I need. Right? That's what we want to be, men, for our spouses. And ladies, that's what you want to find. If you are in a relationship with someone who does not make you feel safe, right, and I want to say this particularly if you're in a relationship with someone like that and you are not yet married, get out. Get out. Right? You do not want to be in a dating relationship with someone who is abusive or makes you feel unsafe. Right? If that, right, you're like, "Well, marriage will fix it." It won't fix it. It won't fix it. It will only get worse. And if you're in that situation now where you're in a relationship, you're in a married relationship with someone who makes you feel unsafe, then you need to get help. You need to get someone from the outside to intervene and intercede, okay? Right? There are, whether it be church leaders or whether you need to actually get law enforcement involved if it's physical abuse, but you need to get help. But here, there's none of that, right? In this situation, she says what? "Oh, I'm secure and I'm safe in your love, in your presence." You're giving me what I need. All right? And then notice in verse 4, right, she says, he brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Right? Now, the banqueting house literally means the house of wine. There's a little uncertainty about what that is. Is this an actual place where people come to rejoice and party and celebrate, or is this a vineyard out in the wilderness? I'm not sure, but I feel like just because it says his banner over me was love, right? This is a picture of I'm flying my flag. Like, I want everybody to know she's mine, right? She's the one for me. Right? This is the point where he's making things public. So I kind of lean towards the first, right? This is maybe the public place where people come, and he's saying, no, this she's mine, right? This is now Facebook official, okay? Right? Things have progressed, and that's what you want in a relationship, right? You want a relationship, you begin pursuing, but then you want it to progress and grow. And if the relationship is not progressing and growing, then it's going to fizzle, right? Now, I say that to those of you who are pursuing marriage, but listen carefully. If you're in a marriage, not only do you want to always be dating your wife, pursuing her, but you want that relationship to continue to grow. Right? If things have become stagnant and cold, look out, right? Look out. So there's advice here, but here the man is saying what? Nope, this is the one I love. His banner over me is love. And then she says, in response, sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am sick with love. His left hand is under my head. His right hand embraces me. He proclaims his love, and she is just losing it. Right? She's like, yep, that's what I want. Right? I want to be with you. I want to feel your embrace. She cannot wait for the future. Again, that's a good desire. Now, it's not saying it's happening now. This is what she wants to happen. In fact, she's so overwhelmed, she's like, give me something to eat so I can take my mind off of this. It's growing. And then right after this progression, what do we see in verse 7? There's that warning we mentioned last week. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Right time, right place, right? And that time is, we said last week, if you're not ready to date unless you're ready to get married. Right? She's warning, and she's saying now, yeah, I'm ready, but listen, be very careful. In fact, there's a warning here, because if these feelings of love grow inside of you, and it's not with the right person, and it's not at the right time, they can become very, very dangerous feelings. Right? And they can lead to very destructive places. Right? So you want to be really cautious here. And I want to say something with this warning, right? Don't stir up love. Don't awaken it until it pleases. Right? Some of you, particularly, maybe you're just like, I really want this marriage relationship. Right? I want that more than anything. And because you have that desire and that longing, you may be willing to take some shortcuts to get there. All right? So I want to just throw out with this warning here, be very cautious. It is better for you to be single and want to be married than to be married and want to be single. You hear what I'm saying? I sit in my office with lots of people over the last few decades who are married and they would like to be single. All right? They've taken shortcuts. All right, so heed the word, heed the warning here. Don't stir up, don't awaken love until it pleases. All right? Now, this growing relationship, it begins with a physical attraction that grows deeper and deeper, and to the point where as we see it progress, there's some things that are happening that are going to help it to grow to this place where it's ready for marriage. And you say, well, what do we see here? Well, beginning in verse 8, it says, the voice of my beloved. Behold, he comes leaping over the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, looking through the lattice. Well, that sounds a little creepy to us, right? He's standing outside, peeking. He's not a peeping Tom or a stalker. He's come to her home. He's waiting outside. He doesn't barge in. He's not demanding what is not yet his. He approaches her with honor and respect, and he comes close, but he doesn't come too close. And she hears his voice, and what does she picture, right? Superman, right? He's coming. He's bounding over the mountains. He's coming over the hills. And she says in verse 10, my beloved speaks and says to me. Right? Now this is really key. We've had this interchange going back and forth. He and she. He and she. And then in verse 8, it says, the voice of my beloved. And in verse 10, my beloved speaks and says to me. And I can't tell you how important this is to the relationship. There must be continued healthy communication in a relationship. And that's true in a dating relationship. That's certainly true in a married relationship. 9 times out of 10, if we're dealing in a counseling situation in a marriage, communication is one of the first issues we got to deal with. Right? There are all kinds of other things, but communication is where it often begins. There's been a lack of a drop in communication, and when that communication is not happening, all kinds of bad things and false inferences can creep in. And here, we see this growing relationship. Why? The voice of my beloved speaks. We've just been seeing this interchange, this back and forth. And it's so vital to a growing relationship. Right? Do you spend time communicating with your spouse? Right? Do you spend time talking to each other? Right? Do you spend time getting to the real heart of the issues in your life? Or is everything just superficial? Right? I mean, I understand. Life is busy and it's crazy, and there can be times where it just feels like there's no time to talk about anything. But you need to make time. It's that important, right? And what happens as we progress here, right? We've kind of been moving forward. So we got pursuit, we have progress, there's communication that's happening, there's spending time together, there's real companionship. In verse 10, he says, arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away. For behold, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree ripens its figs, the vines are in blossom, they give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away. O my dove, in the clefts of the rock and the crannies of the cliff, let me see your face. Let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. What's happening here? He shows up. He's shouting through the lattice from outside the wall, come away with me. This is the proposal, all right? Leave your mom's home. You come and be with me, all right? It's time. Springtime is here, and it's time for the wedding, right? That's really what's happening here, right? And I want you to see her response. And notice, I mean, she is head over heels in love with this guy, right? She is sick with love. But what does she say in verse 15? Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. She's saying, you're right, but there's some things we got to deal with first, right? He says, come away, and she says, not just yet, right? It's almost time, but we've got to deal with the foxes that can spoil the vineyard. What is that talking about? That's the problems and the difficulties that they're going to face, right? They need to work on this relationship. She's thinking long term. She's thinking, right, we want it to last. We want the vineyard to grow and blossom and flourish, so let's deal with the foxes, right? The little things that are going to creep in and they're going to destroy the vineyard. What kind of things can those be? Well, we mentioned some already, a lack of communication, a lack of companionship. If you're not talking and you're not spending time together, those are just some of the things. I think it's good for us to remember marriage is good. It's very good, but it's not without problems, right? And so, again, if you think marriage is the answer to your problems, then you are mistaken. Marriage is beautiful, but it is not without pitfalls. It's not without problems. And she's thinking long term here. She's saying, I want the problems to be resolved. I want to work some things out. That's really good. That's really smart. Right? Yeah. People ask me to marry them all the time. I don't know. I don't understand that. Right? They don't know me. They don't know our church. They're like, I think your church is pretty. Would you marry us? Like, I don't know you, right? Yeah, and I won't marry anybody unless we do premarital counseling. Right? So most people know that. Right? Premarital counseling is a great place to deal with the foxes. Right? We can just talk through some of those things that are going to be problems. Right? Think through some things. You would not believe the people who want to come and get married, and they really don't know that much about each other. Right? I mean, I've sat down with some couples and like, she wants like 9 kids, and he wants 1. Maybe, right? That's a problem, right? You gotta find common ground there, or you gotta say, you know what, this isn't gonna work. Right? And we talk about all kinds of things. We talk about whether you're a dog person or a cat person. We talk about how you're going to raise your children. There are different philosophies and thoughts about how you want to raise up your children, and you got to think through those things, or they're going to be big problems later on. She's saying, let's deal with the foxes. Right? So that can be so many things in the context of a marriage relationship that are attacking the vineyard. It can be finances. It can be intimacy. It can be children. It can be in-laws. It can be aging parents who you're now taking care of. And all of those things are causing trouble in the vineyard. And he says what? We got to deal with the foxes. We got to take care of them. So a big part of that's going to be communication, right? We need to talk about how we're going to handle these things together. All right. So she says, yes, you're right. Our vineyards are in blossom. Springtime is here, but let's deal with this. And then she says, my beloved is mine, and I am his. He grazes among the lilies. Right? What is she saying? I'm all yours. Right? We deal with the foxes, and I'm yours, and you are mine. And that's the way a marriage relationship is meant to be, isn't it? Right? You belong to one another. Yeah, I thank God for my wife. Yeah, I know that she belongs to me and that I belong to her. Right? And by God's grace, I can say with all integrity, my eyes are only for her. My full affection is hers. Yeah, when they this language here is like, there's nobody like you. Right? That's how I feel about that woman. Right? She is mine, and I am hers, and that's the way God has designed marriage to be. What? Until the day breeze and the shadows flee. Turn, my beloved, be like a gazelle or a young stag on the cleft of the mountains. And things have increased dramatically here, okay? I mean, the heat level has raised up a good bit. She's saying, basically, come get me. All right? So the wedding is here. It's coming. We're so very close. She says, we got to deal with the foxes, and then I'm all yours. All right? And so the imagery there is pretty intense. And in verse 1 through 4 of chapter 3, we'll finish up here. This may be where the man of her dreams comes from. I don't know. But she's having a dream. She says, on my bed at night, I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. So this is prior to the wedding. She's waiting for the wedding day, and then this is almost like a nightmare, right? Like I went looking for him, and I couldn't find him anywhere. I'll arise now and go about the city, in the streets and in the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. In the middle of the night, she's going out into the city streets. This would never happen. Right? This is true, intense longing for the one she loves, where she's like, I'm going to pursue him. Doesn't matter the risk. Doesn't matter the danger. She says, the watchmen found me as they went about in the city. Have you seen him whom my soul loves? Oh, she's desperate. Scarcely had I passed them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go until I had brought him into my mother's house, into the chamber of her who conceived me. That's really strange language, right? And you're like, what is that talking about? He's taking him to her mom's room. That's weird, right? But there's a sense in which there's two possible things here. One, she's wanting to join this family together. Right? I want to share with you my entire history. I want to mingle our lives together. But it also could be translated to my mother house. Right? And in that sense, she would be saying, come to my room. Right? This is where we're going to start a family. Right? My mother house. And I think that might be more to the point of where she's heading. Right? Yeah, I'm with you. I'm yours. And I'm ready to start a family. Right? And so she says, I held him and I would not let him go. Now, this is dreams, right? This is in her dreams, but she knows at this point, this is the one that I want to be with. Right? I don't want to let him go. That's the kind of relationship that God desires, right? Until death do us part kind of relationship. And so, in verse 5, we have that warning one more time. I adjure you, daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. All right. So I told you, right? And I think we tried to just practically see these things, right? If you're single and you're unmarried, there's some wonderful advice for you tonight and how to approach a relationship. If you are married, I think there's great helpful things here to think through. Guys, don't get lazy. Girls, don't get listless, right? When that happens, you start looking other places. You want to be a husband or a wife who is pursuing and progressing in your relationship. But for each one of us tonight, as brothers and sisters in Christ, I want you to think about the way in which the bridegroom, right, this woman who felt what? Unlovable. Felt like nobody could love someone like her. And he comes along and he says, come away. Right? Isn't that what happened to us? Right? Isn't that what Christ has done? He called us to himself. We weren't a good catch. Right? 1 Corinthians says that what? We were weak and foolish things of the world that he called. But he called. Right? And we love him. Why? Because he first loved us. Right? And so in that relationship with Christ, we want to hear those two words, right? Pursue and progress. We want to continue to pursue. We want to continue to grow in our relationship with Christ. And those are good, beautiful pictures that point us to the ultimate reality. Because as good as marriage is, and it is wonderful in God's design, it's not ultimate. It's pointing to that relationship with Christ that one day will be consummated. What a day that will be. All right, we're going to finish up. We'll close in prayer.